Your support helps us bring you the most detailed true crime documentaries on cases that reveal how the people we see every day but never really notice can sometimes be hiding in plain sight, planning crimes that challenge everything we think we know about security and trust. Now let's begin with a man who spent 11 years being completely invisible while planning the heist of a lifetime. Phoenix, Arizona. Population 1.7 million. A sprawling desert metropolis where the summer heat can kill and the winter brings floods of tourists seeking escape from colder climates. It's a city of extremes, where glass towers housing billion-dollar corporations cast shadows over neighborhoods where families struggle to pay rent. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., thousands of city workers begin their shifts maintaining the infrastructure that keeps Phoenix functioning. Street sweepers, utility crews, maintenance workers, and the men and women who collect the tons of garbage that a major metropolitan area produces every single day. Before we dive into this incredible story of how society's most invisible worker pulled off one of the most ingenious bank heists in modern history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Victor Reyes was one of those invisible workers. For 11 years, he had driven the same downtown commercial route, collecting refuse from banks, restaurants, office towers, and government buildings. At 38 years old, he was reliable, punctual, and completely forgettable to the hundreds of people who saw him every week but never really noticed him. Victor was just there, recalls Maria Santos, who worked the dispatch desk for Phoenix Sanitation Services. Same truck, same route, same quiet guy who showed up every day and did his job without any drama. In 11 years, I don't think he called in sick more than 3 times. Victor lived alone in a small apartment on the south side of Phoenix, 23 minutes from the depot, where he picked up his truck each morning. His personnel file painted the picture of an ideal employee. No disciplinary actions, no complaints from customers, no incidents that would suggest any problems with his work performance or personal conduct. His background check, renewed every 3 years as required for city employees, revealed a life of modest circumstances and quiet desperation. High school graduate, no college. Previous employment at various manual labor jobs before joining the sanitation department. Divorced, no children. Credit score hovering just above the poverty line, with medical bills from his ex-wife's cancer treatment still dragging down his finances. He was polite, always said hello, but he kept to himself, remembers fellow driver James Rodriguez. Never joined us for beers after work, never talked about weekend plans or vacations. Just seemed like a guy who was grinding through life, working to pay bills and not much else. Victor's co-workers describe him as someone who seemed to fade into the background of any conversation. Not unfriendly, but not particularly social either. He ate lunch alone, reading paperback books or technical magazines. His truck was always clean, his uniform neat, his route completed efficiently and on schedule. What none of his colleagues realized was that Victor had been conducting the most thorough surveillance operation in Phoenix Financial District for over a decade. While they saw routine garbage collection, Victor saw opportunity. He was studying the rhythm of money, learning the schedules and vulnerabilities of institutions that handled millions of dollars in cash every day. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, Victor's route took him past First Trust Bank, a regional institution with 37 branches across Arizona and New Mexico. The downtown Phoenix branch was one of the busiest, processing large cash deposits from businesses throughout the metropolitan area and serving as a distribution hub for smaller branches. Victor had been watching First Trust Bank for 11 years, noting every detail of their operations with the patient attention of someone who understood that knowledge was power. He knew which days they received armored car deliveries, when their vault operations were most active, and how their security procedures changed during different times of the year. Trash men see everything people want to forget, Victor once told a coworker during one of their rare conversations. At the time, it seemed like a philosophical observation about the nature of his work. In retrospect, it was a statement of criminal intent. Victor's sanitation route through downtown Phoenix covered 18 city blocks, including the financial district where several major banks maintained their regional headquarters. His collection schedule was precisely timed. He had to complete the entire route between 6 a.m. and 2 p.m., with specific time windows for each stop based on traffic patterns and business hours. First Trust Bank was his third stop every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. He arrived between 6:15 and 6:30 a.m. when the bank was closed to customers, but operational staff were beginning their daily routines. His truck would pull into the rear loading zone, directly adjacent to the armored car bay where cash deliveries and pickups occurred throughout the week. The bank's location provided Victor with something invaluable: predictable, uninterrupted access to their operational areas during the critical morning hours when large cash transfers occurred. While customers never saw the behind-the-scenes money-handling operations, Victor had a front-row seat to millions of dollars in daily transactions. The garbage pickup zone was right next to where the armored cars parked, explains former bank employee Linda Chen, who worked in First Trust's cash operations department. We saw the sanitation truck 3 times a week for years. After a while, you don't even notice it anymore. It's just part of the routine. Over 11 years of observations, Victor had learned the bank's cash handling schedule with scientific precision. Monday mornings brought weekend deposits from retail businesses. Wednesday deliveries stocked ATMs throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. Friday shipments prepared the bank for high-volume weekend transactions. But Thursday mornings were different. Thursday deliveries contained the largest cash reserves, often exceeding $15 million in small denomination bills that would be distributed to smaller branches over the weekend. The money sat in temporary holding areas while bank staff processed the complex paperwork required for interbranch transfers. Victor had also identified a critical vulnerability in the bank's security system. Construction work on an adjacent building had required the temporary relocation of a security camera that normally monitored the rear loading area. The camera had been moved 6 months earlier, but its new position created a blind spot near the garbage collection zone. We had a work order to fix that camera placement, recalls former First Trust security coordinator Robert Martinez. But it wasn't considered high priority because the area was already covered by other surveillance equipment. Looking back, it was a significant oversight that should have been addressed immediately. The construction zone also provided natural cover for anyone who might need to spend extra time in the loading area without attracting attention. Temporary barriers, equipment storage, and the general chaos of ongoing construction work created an environment where unusual activity might not be noticed by bank staff or security personnel. Victor understood that successful crime required more than just opportunity. It required method, timing, and most importantly, invisibility. He was already invisible to the bank staff, who had seen him collecting garbage for over a decade without ever really seeing him. Now he needed to figure out how to exploit that invisibility to access the millions of dollars that passed through First Trust's operations every week. The answer came to him gradually, through months of careful observation and technical research. He didn't need to break into the bank or overcome their security systems. He needed to trick the bank into giving him their money voluntarily, through the same routine procedures that had made him invisible in the first place. Victor spent 2 months preparing for what would become known as the First Trust heist, though his preparation was so methodical and invisible that no one suspected criminal activity until it was far too late to prevent it. His plan required solving several technical challenges that would have deterred most potential criminals. He needed to create a container that could hold millions of dollars while appearing to be routine sanitation equipment. The container had to be heavy enough to seem legitimate when empty, but capable of concealing extraordinary weight when full. Most importantly, it had to be indistinguishable from the hundreds of garbage bins that were moved around Phoenix every day. Victor's solution was both elegant and sophisticated. Working in the garage behind his apartment, he modified a standard commercial trash bin to include a false bottom, lead shielding to block electronic tracking devices, and a hydraulic locking mechanism that could secure a hidden compartment beneath bags of ordinary garbage. The modifications took 6 weeks to complete, working only during evening hours when his neighbors were unlikely to notice the unusual activity. Victor purchased the materials from different suppliers across Phoenix, paying cash and avoiding any transactions that might create a paper trail connecting him to the project. He was always working on something in that garage, recalls neighbor Patricia Williams. Thought he was just fixing up an old car or doing some kind of hobby project. Never seemed like anything unusual, just a guy who liked to work with his hands. The modified container was virtually identical to standard city-issued garbage bins, but its hidden compartment could hold up to 200 pounds of material while maintaining the external appearance of normal refuse collection equipment. Lead shielding would prevent electronic tracking devices from transmitting location data, while the hydraulic lock could only be opened with a specific sequence that Victor had programmed into the mechanism. Testing the container required several trial runs to ensure it would pass casual inspection by bank staff or security personnel. Victor loaded it with weights and moved it around his neighborhood, timing how long it took to load and unload while maintaining the appearance of routine sanitation work. In July 2022, Phoenix was hit by an unusual summer storm system that created ideal conditions for Victor's plan. Heavy rains and lightning caused power outages throughout the downtown area, including temporary disruptions to First Trust Bank's security systems and electronic monitoring equipment. The storm knocked out power to about half the financial district, explains former city emergency coordinator Dr. Michael Torres. Most buildings had backup power, but some security systems experienced glitches and temporary failures. It was the kind of unusual situation that creates opportunities for anyone who's prepared to take advantage of them. Victor had been monitoring weather forecasts and power grid reports for months, waiting for exactly this type of situation. The storm would provide natural cover for any unusual activity, while power disruptions would create gaps in electronic surveillance that might not be noticed until much later. On Thursday morning, July 14th, Victor arrived at First Trust Bank carrying his modified container instead of the standard garbage bin. The substitution was seamless. Same size, same weight, same appearance. To anyone watching, it was just another routine stop on a sanitation route that had been unchanged for 11 years. The container was positioned exactly where Victor had planned, in the blind spot created by the relocated security camera, adjacent to the loading area where armored car deliveries occurred. Everything was ready for the most audacious phase of his plan, convincing the bank to put their money into his container voluntarily. At 6:17 a.m. on July 14, 2022, a temporary janitor named Michael Torres began his first week of employment at First Trust Bank. He was filling in for the regular custodial staff member who was on vacation, working through a staffing agency that provided short-term personnel for various downtown businesses. Torres was eager to make a good impression and had arrived early to familiarize himself with the bank's layout and cleaning procedures. He noticed that someone had left a garbage container near the loading dock and, wanting to be helpful, decided to wheel it inside to empty it along with the other refuse containers in the building. "I thought I was doing the right thing," Torres later told investigators. "There was this big garbage bin sitting outside, and I figured it belonged inside with the others. Seemed like the previous janitor had just left it in the wrong place." Torres had no way of knowing that the container he wheeled inside was Victor's modified bin, or that his helpful gesture was about to create the opportunity for one of the largest cash thefts in Arizona history. That same morning, First Trust Bank received its regular Thursday armored car delivery, $18 million in small denomination bills that would be distributed to branch locations throughout Phoenix and surrounding areas over the weekend. The delivery was routine, properly documented, and secured according to standard banking procedures. The money was temporarily stored in the bank's processing area while staff completed the complex paperwork required for inter-branch transfers. Multiple steel lockboxes, each containing precisely counted amounts of currency, were organized on rolling carts that would later be moved to the main vault for secure storage. Due to a combination of miscommunication, inadequate supervision, and the confusion created by having temporary staff, one lockbox containing exactly $18 million was placed into the wrong container. Instead of being secured in the vault, the money was inadvertently loaded into Victor's modified garbage bin along with routine office waste. "It was a perfect storm of human error," explains banking security consultant Dr. Jennifer Walsh. "Temporary employee who didn't know the procedures, regular staff distracted by storm cleanup, and a container that looked exactly like it belonged there. Everything had to go wrong in exactly the right way for this theft to succeed." Security camera footage later revealed the precise timeline of errors that made the theft possible. At 6:17 a.m., Torres wheeled the container inside. At 6:23 a.m., bank staff began processing the armored car delivery. At 6:31 a.m., the lockbox was placed in the wrong container due to a miscommunication about which bins were designated for different types of materials. At 6:44 a.m., Torres returned the container to its original position outside the loading dock, completely unaware that he was moving $18 million in stolen cash. Bank security cameras recorded every step of the process, but the footage appeared to show nothing more than routine custodial work and normal cash processing procedures. Victor arrived for his scheduled pickup at 6:47 a.m., 3 minutes after the container had been returned to its position near the loading dock. His collection routine was identical to hundreds of previous stops. Back the truck up to the container, load it onto the hydraulic lift, and compress it into the truck's storage compartment. It looked exactly like every other garbage pickup, recalls bank employee Linda Chen, who witnessed the collection from her office window. Same truck, same driver, same routine we'd seen 3 times a week for years. Nothing unusual or suspicious about it at all. By 6:52 a.m., Victor was driving away from First Trust Bank with $18 million in cash. The theft had been completed in less than 5 minutes, using nothing more sophisticated than routine sanitation procedures and a temporary employee's helpful mistake. The money wouldn't be missed for another 4 hours when bank staff began the midday vault reconciliation that was standard procedure for all large cash deliveries. By then, Victor would be long gone, and the trail would be nearly impossible to follow. Victor completed his regular collection route with mechanical precision, stopping at 17 more locations before the theft was discovered. To anyone observing his behavior, he appeared to be conducting routine sanitation work with the same efficiency and professionalism that had characterized his 11 years of employment. But Victor's route had been carefully modified for this particular day. Instead of returning directly to the sanitation depot for lunch break and afternoon assignments, he made an unscheduled stop at a storage warehouse in an industrial area 15 miles south of downtown Phoenix. The warehouse had been rented 6 months earlier under the false name Roberto Martinez, with rent paid in cash through a property management company that didn't require extensive background verification. Victor had told the rental agent that he needed space for storing vehicle parts and restoration equipment, a perfectly legitimate reason that attracted no attention or additional scrutiny. Working quickly and efficiently, Victor transferred the modified container from his sanitation truck to a concealed compartment he had constructed inside the warehouse. The lockbox containing $18 million was secured in a temperature-controlled environment with multiple layers of protection against discovery by law enforcement agencies. Victor then continued to the sanitation depot, where he completed his regular shift and signed out at exactly 2:17 p.m. His time card showed a normal workday, with no unusual delays or extended breaks. His truck passed routine inspection without any problems, and his supervisor noted nothing unusual about his performance or behavior. He seemed completely normal that day, recalls Supervisor Maria Santos. Maybe a little quiet, but Victor was always quiet. Finished his route on time, cleaned his truck properly, went home like always. If he had just stolen $18 million, he sure didn't act like it. Meanwhile, First Trust Bank was beginning to realize that something was seriously wrong with their cash inventory. The midday vault reconciliation revealed that one lockbox from the morning's armored car delivery was missing, but initial searches focused on internal processing errors rather than theft. Our first assumption was that someone had misplaced the lockbox or filed it in the wrong section, explains former bank operations manager Robert Chen. We spent 2 hours checking every vault compartment, every processing area, every possible location where it might have been placed by mistake. When the internal search failed to locate the missing money, bank security began reviewing surveillance, footage, and interviewing staff members who had handled the morning delivery. The investigation revealed the series of errors that had placed $18 million in a garbage container. But by then, Victor's truck had already completed its route and returned to the depot. FBI agents arrived at First Trust Bank at 4:23 p.m., beginning an investigation that would eventually span multiple states and involve dozens of federal agents. But Victor had already implemented the next phase of his escape plan, putting crucial distance between himself and the crime scene. That evening, Victor cleaned out his bank account, liquidated his modest investment portfolio, and converted the proceeds to Bitcoin using anonymous cryptocurrency exchange services. He packed essential belongings into a single suitcase, left his apartment key with the building manager, and drove toward the Mexican border in a used pickup truck he had purchased with cash 2 weeks earlier. Victor crossed into Mexico at the Lukeville border crossing at 11:47 p.m. on July 14th, less than 18 hours after committing the theft. Border Patrol records show him entering Mexico legally with valid identification, claiming to be taking a weekend vacation in Rocky Point, a popular destination for Arizona residents. By the time FBI agents identified Victor as a suspect and obtained warrants for his arrest, he had vanished into the vast transportation networks of Central America, carrying enough stolen money to disappear permanently. The FBI investigation into the First Trust Bank theft began with the assumption that the crime was an inside job involving bank employees with access to cash processing areas. For the first 48 hours, investigators focused primarily on current and former bank staff, conducting polygraph examinations and detailed background checks on anyone who had handled the missing money. The methodology strongly suggested insider knowledge, explains former FBI agent Patricia Martinez, who led the initial investigation. Someone knew exactly when the money would be there, how it was being processed, and where it would be vulnerable to theft. That typically points to employees or people with intimate knowledge of banking procedures. But as the investigation expanded, a different picture began to emerge. Security camera footage revealed the series of errors that had placed the money in a garbage container, while interviews with bank staff eliminated most employees as suspects. The focus gradually shifted to external factors that might have contributed to the theft. The breakthrough came when investigators realized that the garbage container involved in the theft didn't match the standard bins used by Phoenix Sanitation Services. Close examination revealed subtle differences in construction, weight, and material composition that suggested the container had been modified or replaced specifically for criminal purposes. That's when we knew we were dealing with something much more sophisticated than a typical inside job, Martinez explains. Someone had invested significant time and resources in planning this theft, including creating specialized equipment designed to exploit routine sanitation procedures. Victor's identity as a suspect emerged gradually through process of elimination and routine background checks on city employees who had access to the bank. His 11-year employment record with sanitation services placed him at First Trust Bank 3 times per week, while his financial situation provided obvious motive for criminal activity. When FBI agents arrived at Victor's apartment on July 16th, they found it completely empty. Not just cleaned out, but professionally sanitized with no traces of DNA, fingerprints, or personal belongings that might provide clues about his destination or criminal planning. He had been preparing for this possibility for months, observes criminal behavior specialist Dr. Michael Santos. The apartment wasn't just empty, it was sterilized. He understood that law enforcement would eventually identify him as a suspect and had planned accordingly. Victor's abandoned garbage truck was discovered 3 days later in a remote area of the Sonoran Desert, approximately 14 miles from the Mexican border. The vehicle had been thoroughly cleaned and contained only 2 pieces of evidence: a partially burned work glove and a receipt from a gas station that suggested Victor had traveled toward the Lukeville border crossing. Border Patrol records confirmed that Victor had entered Mexico legally on July 14th, but tracking his movements beyond that point proved nearly impossible. Mexican authorities cooperated with the investigation, but Victor had effectively vanished into the vast networks of Central and South American transportation systems. He understood that once he crossed the border, our ability to track him would be severely limited, explains international fugitive specialist Agent Jennifer Kim. Mexico has thousands of small towns, informal transportation networks, and border crossings that make it relatively easy for someone with resources to disappear permanently. The investigation revealed that Victor had been planning his escape for at least a week, at least 6 months, gradually liquidating assets and converting them to cryptocurrency that could be accessed from anywhere in the world. His financial preparation, combined with his early border crossing, had given him a crucial head start that investigators would never be able to overcome. Interpol issued international alerts for Victor's capture, and the FBI offered a substantial reward for information leading to his arrest. But despite extensive international cooperation and sophisticated tracking efforts, no confirmed sightings of Victor have been reported since his border crossing on July 14, 2022.